So, after trying to deny, or at least saying, well, we might have the elections in the same time as the May local elections, Rishi Sunak has now said that there is going to be a general election in the second half of the year. Still no exact date as to when that is going to be. And as we reported on previously, you now have all the Tories running, trying to hide, delay freedom of information requests, as much stuff as they possibly can, because they know there's going to be a general election. So they're trying to delay as many reports and all kinds of other things coming out that might be quite embarrassing during a general election scenario. So even they know, yes, it is coming down the pipe. We know that there is going to it is going to happen. It's just a matter of more when now, not if. Um, and especially when you get more and more things like in the polls, we've seen Labour is still very much ahead in the polls. That has not changed. Um, we talked about on the Pony Club, and then so the Patreon members will have access to that as well. By the way, links down below to that if you want to see that video. We talked about the sort of the conservative view of what they thinking about a general election should be, and the hope that somehow they could do a budget which would somehow close this gap. And remember, we've already had an autumn budget, and yet that didn't exactly close the gap either. Things have only got more and more further apart. And of course, a new piece of polling information dropped out as well. That people do want an earlier general election. They want one sooner rather than later. And pretty much Sunak has pretty much now said it is going to be sooner rather than earlier, which is what most people, according to that poll, particularly want. So we're going to have a look at not my general election predictions. We're going to have a look at what Robert Ford has said about his general election predictions, because this is a guy who is very much into this and sort of given a very sort of detailed analysis of what he thinks could happen during the 2024 general election. So I think this will be kind of interesting to sort of visit this now. And then maybe after the 24 general election that we could sort of come back and maybe revisit some of these predictions. How many of these predictions sort of came true? What do I think about some of these predictions as well? I'll give my own sort of predictions as well during this. But as always, like I say, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel. Before we do get into this, please remember to click on the like and share button, and of course subscribe if you are new to the channel. There is of course the Patreon page down below, and of course the Pony Club down below as well, which you can link up at, which you can support me through that, and you can get access to sort of the weekly video that we make for you on that as well. There's also the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, and of course there's the YouTube thank you button as well. So without further ado, let's get on to see what Robert Ford has had to say, because honestly, he's one of the guys who, when he says something about these sort of general elections, and when he makes sort of predictions, he's kind of the guy that you should pay attention to. Like I say, he's a professor of politics. He wrote two really of the many. Well, he wrote one of the many books about the Red Wall, the 2019 election, and of course he wrote Brexitland. If you've never read that, of course, that talks all about why people voted for Brexit, etc. Why it's called Brexitland. But anyway, we'll go through this post because I think it's well worth going through. There's a lot of information to say here, and a lot of stuff to go over. So, let's get cracking then, shall we? So, he begins. Okay, time for the 2024 general election predictions thread now. I'm going to start with Reform UK and Nigel Farage, and his predictions have repercussions across the rest of this piece. So, first of all, will Farage return? That has been the complete question that many people have asked since the Conservative Party Congress. What is Nigel Farage going to do? We cannot deny the fact that if Nigel Farage does run, doesn't run, endorses candidates, doesn't endorse candidates, that's going to have a lot of impacts across a potential general election. So will Farage return? If he does, it will certainly be to lead Reform UK election campaigns. This excellent Tom Maguire piece of the unusual structure of Reform UK, a company with Farage as majority shareholder, means that Farage can take over any time he wants. Although there would be a significant battle if that happens. Of course, Richard Trice has a lot of debts, shall we say, in Reform UK. So if Farage did take over, it wouldn't be very easy for him to do. He would certainly owe a lot of money to Richard Trice, which would almost certainly encumber any potential general election campaign. So that is something I think to bear in mind, which I don't think Rob Ford mentions in his thread. So he continues. The case for a return is clear. There's one again a market for much of Farage's product, opposition to immigration, populist ranging at failed elites, even Brexit. Farage can mobilise the dissatisfaction about it by claiming, as he regularly does, that true Brexit never happened. That true Brexit never happened due to the elite incompetency and treachery. The case against Farage would have to abandon a very burgeoning media career, as he would be, of course, at risking being blamed for the Tory defeat, which might weaken his influence with the Conservatives. But OTOH, a very large Reform UK Reform vote, may convince the Conservatives once again that tackling the populist right is the only route to recovery, in which case Farage becomes a power player once again. Another factor is how Farage regards his potentially large Labour majority, free to pursue policies he dislikes, perhaps even for 2 terms. It's a hard call, and I have to take relatively low confidence in it, that 60%, but I'm going to stick my neck out and say that he comes back. The lure of the limelight, his long-proven ability to set the agenda and panic the Tories into adopting his ideas, can have a change in the influence in a post-general election, in any post-general election leadership contest. Will it be enough to tempt him back? That is the case. Will Farage not return? I do sort of agree with what Rob Ford has said there. I think Farage loves being in the limelight. I really think he does. So Farage is more likely to return than he is not. So at 60%, as Rob Ford has said, yeah, I would agree with that. I would probably say that there is a very good 60% chance Farage does return. Farage loves the limelight. He loves being the attention person. And of course, he loves not being the solutions guy, because Farage, let's remind you, Farage is not a solutions guy. He is a whiner. He loves to say and point at the problems and point out the problems and, go after the problems, but never really talk about solutions. How, so the Farage solutions, we just stop immigration. You can't just stop immigration. It's not that easy. There are other consequences that is going to come with. So, as we've said time and time before, Farage is the typical populist offering really easy solutions, or what are meant to be really easy solutions. But if you are in power, those solutions do not really come that easily. And we have seen populists time and time again, when they have gotten in power, even very recently, not being able to implement their solutions properly, and they haven't really worked out. As has been sort of the case we've seen in Poland. You've seen Italy, classic example, replaced with populist governments, because every single time they haven't been able to implement their full agendas properly. And of course, another populist comes along and says and blames them for not doing it right. It's a big, massive wheel. And like I say, there is a big difference between being in opposition and being in power. So back to this then. So what then will this mean for Reform UK in a general election? And that is very true. And I think you've got to, as he has done, split the what if Farage is back and what if Farage is not back. So I think the polls, which currently have them at least 10% without Farage, are probably overstating them. Some of that will get squeezed back to the cons. Some may very well be polling issues. They aren't matching this in locals. And that is very true. Even though they are being polled at 10%, whenever you have seen a local election or something like that, they haven't managed to replicate this at all. Like, once again, they are not replicating this at the local. Ironically, it's the exact opposite the Greens have. They seem to perform sort of well at locals, but when it comes to a general election, they then can't replicate that success. But who knows? However, with Farage, I think they can actually match this mark. With a 10% total vote in England and Wales, it will be roughly halfway between UKIP's performance in England and Wales in 2015 at 14% and the Brexit Party performance in seats where it stood at 2019 at 5.5. So here's the first set of GE predictions. Farage will return as leader of Reform UK, and Reform UK will stand in most all England and Wales seats, and will secure a total of England and Wales seats vote of at least 10%. They will flop in Scotland, so a total GB vote will at least be 9%. Do I agree with that or not? It depends what seats they're standing. I think that's it. Almost all seats. I really do get the impression that Farage is going to go after the Tories, and I think he is going to go after the Tories hard. So he may, or Reform UK, if Farage does return, Reform UK may decide that they are going to go after Tories who they consider to be not conservatives and run as we are the true conservatives. If you are a conservative in this seat, you should vote for us, not the Conservative Party, because we are the true conservatives. You've seen this, by the way, in the Conservative and Democratic organization. Of course, you saw Farage dancing with Priti Patel and other people of that organization as well who were in that room. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. Maybe they link up somehow. Maybe they do something maybe together. I'm not saying that the Conservatives will unite with the Reform UK, but there is a good chance that they could very much pull some of that weight over to them. So will they win any seats? I've said before, I wouldn't be surprised if Reform UK managed to get like 2 or 3 MPs. I would not be surprised. But back to it. So this will mean that an 8-point rise overall in support of Reform UK very much in 2024 versus the Brexit Party in 2019 in England, and a 5-point rise in Wales. However, seats in which have already been Conservative in 2019 will rise bigger because the Brexit Party did not stand candidates in those seats. This will very much likely heavily from the 2019 Tory voters, particularly in seats where the Brexit Party didn't stand last time, but not totally. Reform UK will also draw some of the anti-incumbent votes off Labour, and of course will pick up a good deal of 2019 non-voters. Again, I very much agree with that, how Reform UK will act. I think, of course, as the big question, as was said, will they run or not? That is the big question. Will Farage be there or not? Because you've really got to talk about Reform UK, or when you are talking about Reform UK, you've got to talk about it. Well, what if Farage comes back? What if he doesn't come back? That is, of course, the big up in the air question, and we'll probably find out sooner or later at this year's some point when Farage comes back. So, up next, the Greens. I expect that their vote will go up, as they are a natural home for progressive left-wing voters disappointed by Starmer. They've done well in the locals too. OTH, again, very strong versus the anti-incumbent. Mood will squeeze them in the marginals, where the desire to remove Conservatives will be strong. I think that their best. I think they'll post their best ever results despite this, with at least 4.5% of the GB vote. Most of the big rises will be in the big city areas with very large Labour majorities. I think they'll still have that 1 seat in the Commons total. But I'm going to stick my neck out and say that they will lose Brighton Pavilion, but pick up a seat somewhere else. Perhaps new Bristol Central seat. I have said this before, and I have said this again. they are very much likely to lose Brighton Pavilion. Why? Because Caroline Lucas is not there anymore. She is standing down. The Greens do not seem to realize the almost name recognition Caroline Lucas has among that area, and the fact that practically people were voting for her in Brighton Pavilion, not necessarily the Green Party. Something else that a lot of Green voters do not seem to have really have picked up on. But no, I will agree with that as well. I am very much said they will probably lose their Brighton Pavilion seat. That if they do happen to pick up Bristol Central, again, Bristol Central, maybe they might even not pick that up. Bristol Central was obviously the big sort of win that they had during the local council elections. And of course, as we've said before, they've never truly replicated brought their success forward to a general election. But that's all of it for the Greens. Next, of course, the Lib Dems. I suspect their aggregate vote won't change much, but they will instead become a much more efficiently distributed geography and politically. The Lib Dems will go up a lot. Where they're second, but they will go down a lot in Conservative versus Labour marginals and other contests where they're third, like Labour versus SNP, etc. The loss of the strong anti-Brexit votes from 2019 will be balanced by the gain of the strong anti-Tory voters put off last time by Corbyn. I'm going to predict a no change in the total of the Lib Dem vote, so about 12% in England, distributed across very similar nationally in 2019. Higher in England, where the most likely to targets are now are, a bit lower in Scotland, where they still have some of their heartlands, but a lot lower in Wales. Yeah, I do sort of agree with that. I think the big wins will be where it is the choices are Labour or it's not Labour, but Lib Dems or Conservatives. I think that is where we will probably see some big surprises on general election night. It would not surprise me if the Lib Dems, as they have proven to in the past, that they can beat Conservatives in sort of their blue wall seats and have done pretty well to be able to get those seats. The other thing that we've got to watch as well on election night is, can the Lib Dems hold those seats that they won in those by-elections? That will be something else to watch on general election night. So far, when you look at the polls, they are on course to do that. So, up next, SNP versus Labour in Scotland. The trend line in polling since Sturgeon departure has been very clear. SNP sharply down, Labour rising steadily. You can see the graph here. There are no good reasons to expect that will continue. There are no good reasons to expect that to continue. Youssef is unpopular and is much less an effective leader than Sturgeon was. The scandal will continue to weaken the SNP as the investigations into finances continue, and general anti-incumbent mood may very well mobilise voters against the SNP, who have very much been in charge in Holyrood even longer than the Conservatives have been in charge at Westminster. I therefore think the SNP. Therefore, the SNP to Labour swing has still further to go. Scotch Labour will overtake the SNP, and Scott Labour at 36% plus 11, SNP at 33 minus 12. A uniform 11.5 point swing to the SNP to Labour swings Labour about 20 seat gains. I think their gain will be higher due to the A, biggest win to Labour in historically Labour areas, and B, the anti-SNP pro-unionial tactical voting, and of course, third, by place the Liberal Democrats and Conservative voters in the SNP Liberal seats. I predict at least 28 Liberal gains from the SNP, and the Liberal Democrats going to regain East Derbyshire, and no net change for the Conservatives. While they also may gain from the SNP slump, I think that the slump will will further out the gains that they will make at any way will be offset by losses elsewhere. So all the predictions obviously bring us to the main event, the Conservatives versus Labour contest in England and Wales. Predictions so far imply a very similar two big votes. So, of course, as you can see here, Lib Dem 24, Reform 10, Greens 4.5, SNP 3, Plaid and Other Minors 2, total non-con lab 31, total con and Labour vote 68.5. My smaller party predictions therefore imply a return to more fragmented pre-post Brexit norm in voting. Here are the two-party GB vote shares since 1997. So we roughly think, according to this, that the vote share between the two big parties is roughly going to be about 60 to 70%. And this is a lot of people really do think that this is the election where things might go back to normal. After very much the Brexit shockwaves and Boris Johnson taking advantage of those 2019 shockwaves, that was sort of the end of it. Because after 2019, remember, the Conservatives were expecting, we've got this massive victory, now time to go to the locals and take away all these Labour councils. That did not happen. Very much expectedly so of what the Conservatives want to do in the Red Wall. That did not happen. That has upset continuously many of these Conservative MPs up here in the Red Wall, time and time again, when they have not performed as they had hoped. But we'll see. So Rob Ford continues and said, this feels right to me for a number of reasons. The unifying force of the Brexit is now gone. So the LR trend towards fragmentation could very well reassert itself. The electoral geography will encourage large tactical anti-conservative voting in many seats where Labour are out of the running. Enthusiasm for too big, of course, for the too big overall is currently low. Voters have turned against Conservatives but have not fallen in love with Labour. Silence of Im and of course return of Farage will push reform on the right fringe, and of course silence of the climate change will push Greens on the left fringe. So 68.5 would be in line with the very two big levels of two swing voters back from 2005 to 15 before Brexit shook the system. The current polling would also broadly be in this range. For example, Con at 25, Labour at 43 would combine exactly with 68.5. A lot of recent polls do look close to that, so I do expect no big change between that and then election day. And again, we've seen the polls. Labour have been well ahead in the polls quite consistently. They've really failed time and time again, the Conservatives, to close this gap. And I think that it is the sense that people are just fed up of the Conservatives by this point and that they want them gone. So it will be very much, bye bye Conservatives, hello Labour government, and at least to, some nice return to normality in some cases. So no, I think the result will be a lot closer than this. Farage return will, of course, prevent the cons squeezing votes from Reform UK, but I think the cons will recover some votes of Labour due to better economies, and some don't knows will come back into the fold. The 43.5 would, of course, be very close to Blair's 1997 showing. That feels a bit high. Blair in the late 1990s was by some margin the most popular leader of either party in polling history, as mentioned. I think that Labour will leak some votes to the Greens on the left flank. So I'm going to go to Con at least 28% and Labour 40%. That compares with the GB vote share predictions below as follows. So Labour will be at 40 with plus 7.5. Conservatives will be at 28 with minus 16.7. Lib Democrats won't change at 12. Reform UK at 10. Greens at 4.5. SNP at 3. And PC and others at probably 2. So would this be a 12-point Conservative to Labour sling, which would be larger than Blair even achieved in 1997? The 17.25 Conservative decline would be the largest ever vote share slump, belating at least the 2015 Liberal Democrat record. But Labour's vote increase of 7.5 would be less than Blair's in 1997's, Attlee in 1945, or even Corbyn in 2017. So, what would this mean, of course, in seat terms? Much depends on the pattern of tactical voting, as we can see by using Ben Swarm's excellent election simulation and simulator. Just the results to reflect my Scotland prediction, which in Ben's apps doesn't calculate separately. So, if we assume zero tactical voting, then we get roughly Labour 315, Cons at 211, Lib Dems at 34, SNP at 18, with a Labour majority of 52. A quarter of Labour, Lib Dems, and Green vote tactically for the strongest local candidate will come out with Labour at 360, Conservatives at 204, Liberal Democrats at 44, and SNP at 18, with a Labour majority of over 70. If half of of Labour, Liberal Democrats, and Green vote tactically, then we will get Labour at 370, Conservatives at 181, and Liberal Democrats at 57, SNP at 18, with a Labour majority of 90. Sorry. So again, these are good. We want to see a very nice, solid Labour majority. That will be very nice, to be honest. And of course, the less Conservatives there are, the better. So, as far as I'm concerned, as always, do go out and vote tactically. There are maps out there to see where to look at your constituency and who would be your best vote to vote tactically. So, with these vote share, Labour are thus very highly likely to have a substantial majority, but tactical voting could make the majority larger. But I also think there are two other factors, not in Ben's model, which will push Labour's seat haul up even higher. So, firstly, Ben's model assumes no uniform swing, but there are now good reasons to think that a swing may not be uniform. In recent local elections, Conservatives have done worse in places where they have started the strongest, and a proportional pattern swing. Oh, here we go. To see this article by Stephen D. Fisher. Secondly, I think that Ben Swall's model distribution, extra reform UK votes, will uniformly go across seats, but it is very likely that Reform UK will do better, and the Cons will not lose in Conservative seats, but most of them, with the Brexit Party, didn't stand in 2019. So if we assume at least a 50% tactical voting, there will be about 50 England and Wales seats where Ben's models spits out a Conservative majority of 5 points or less. So if we assume that proportional swing and of higher Reform UK votes flip through to half of these in very much second place, we will get the following. Labour at 388, Conservatives at 156, Lib Dems at 64, SNP at 18, and that would make a Labour majority of 126. So once again, showing how important tactical voting is going to be. So I should make clear that this is very basic. Back of the envelope type of calculation. This is not very sophisticated, and when it comes with the most heaviest of caveats, these are all guesstimates and not fully worked out through models. So again, most of these though, his predictions though, I would generally agree with. I do agree with a lot of that. But as we've said before, we don't know what's going to happen within the next 6 months. We don't know, of course, as we've said, general elections are funny beasts. You don't really know what may become the big election grabber during a general election. It's just going to have to see what happens. But I think it's a very useful exercise, of course, in a broader context to try and make clear predictions. Very clearly explained. I've worked through each out of these estimates in the election and in principle and seen when that comes out. In each link, I've changed what seems very plausible and or grounded in the evidence that we have. Farage returning, Reform UK doing really well if it does, a strong Green vote, a bigger SNP to Labour swing, high tactical voting, some proportional swings, and of course, stronger Reform UK performances where the Brexit Party did not stand last time. Based on all those things happening and using the seat modeler, plus my very own handmade adjustments, then again, a very basic approach, better modeling strategies are of course available. This is his Rob Ford's seat prediction of Labour at 388, Conservatives at 156, Liberal Democrats at 64, SNP at 18, with a Labour majority of 126. In a bold prediction, and will very probably be wrong, I'd be very surprised if even the link in the chain came out as expected. But I'd still rather have a detailed wrong prediction than a vague right one, as it will be easier than to try and figure out what's going on with my predictions and why. Um, yeah. Um, most of the stuff I agree with. Um, Especially when you're talking about, Reform UK, you've got to factor in the whole, will Farage return or not? That is something that has to be thought out about. Then you've got, um, the whole thing with, as you said, with, the S&P at the moment. Things are not particularly going to play out well for the S&P this year, if you are honest, and that's being very generous. That's being very generous of me. Um, so very much likely that the S&P are going to sort of potentially lose a lot of seats, lose a lot of steam this year. You've got, of course, um, the Green vote. Again, I don't think the Greens. Do think that the Greens are going to lose Brighton Pavilion. I do not think they will pick up another seat. I'll be very surprised if they do. But if they do manage to hold Brighton Pavilion, congratulations, you've got another Green MP. Um, uh, you know, we'll see how well they do compared to Caroline Lucas. And of course, I would not be too surprised if they do lose this. As I've said many, many times before, Greens have these, oh, we did really well at these local elections. Wow, this is it. This is it. This is the year we get more than one Green MP. This is it, guys. Yet they don't really do that well every single time, because the real choice at this general election, and let's say what this real general election really is, your choice is either going to be to vote tactically, meaning that your vote will either have to go to sort of Labour or the Lib Dems. Like, that is your choice. Because if you do vote that way, um, you will get out the Conservatives. And more than likely, people's main priority, as should be the main priority, particularly of this general election, is getting the Tories out. Um, And more importantly, I think, as I've said before, setting up a really progressive parliament. I think we are going to get a lot of very progressive things done this year. I really do think that. I think that is definitely on the cards. I still do believe that. I still do think that is very likely to happen and will be a very good thing for the UK if that happens. But as I've said, as always, this is politics. You do not get 100% of everything that you want. And I would much rather have a government where I'm going to get 40% of what I want than a Conservative government where I'm going to get nothing of what I want. So that's the general election. But what do you think about some of these predictions that Professor Rob Ford made on here? Some of these I do quite agree with. When he's come to it, as we said, some of them, again, I think tactical voting is the big what if. It depends how much the message of tactical voting has sunk in. I think it has sunk in quite effectively, but general election, you do not know what could happen at a general election. They are bizarre, weird beasts. Remember, Theresa May went with a very large poll lead and completely wiped out her majority. So we do not know, of course, what will happen in general election. They are strange, weird beasts. We don't know even what would happen. Um, you know, 6 months from now. You talk about Farage returning. What if Farage has a heart attack between now and 6 months from now that, you know, takes him out of action? That could happen. That could have a big effect on elections. As we said, you've got to think about Reform UK. If there is a Farage return, if there isn't a Farage return, who knows what could happen between then and there. But as always, we will bring you and keep you up to date as best we can. So, as always, please remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, leave a comment down below. What do you think of some of these predictions? Do you agree with some of them? Do you disagree with some of them? Let me know, of course, down in the comments below. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.